that our church body has had over 175 years has been quite unique. Does everybody have what they need? Did you need something else? No? Okay. Let's begin with a prayer. Let's begin with prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, you have given us the privilege to partner in the Great Commission to carry your gospel to every nation, tribe, language, and people. We thank you that through our synod's history, we have taken advantage of opportunities that you have placed before us to spread the gospel in places we cannot go. We pray that you would continue to be with our missionaries near and far, that they would continue to be faithful in proclaiming the gospel truth in all the world. Be with us and bless us in our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we get started, I'm going to make a little public service announcement. First of all, if you're like into stickers, like cool kids today, like put them on their computers and things. I have two. If you want to grab one on your way out today, one is for the anniversary sticker, and the other is for the WELS Historical Institute. So if you're interested at all, feel free to grab those. I'll leave those up here on the table, on the podium, if you want to do that on your way out. The other thing is, just last week. Maybe you had seen, I'm sure Pastor Cuck, I think, had advertised a while back, the pre-order sale for the new pictorial history book that we were putting together. And, well, it's printed, and I have a copy of it here. And so I'll pass this around. If you want to look at it, just page through a little bit. In case you haven't ordered it, maybe it'll pique your interest. If you did pre-order it, they should be shipping or getting mailed out, I think, in the beginning of May. I think it's when the plan is to mail those out to those who pre-ordered them. So I'll just send this around if you want to look at it. A lot of the pictures I've been showing have come from our research and the work that we did finding them for this book. So I'll start it right here, and you can just make it work around there. And then I'll get going on our presentation, our Bible class today. So today we're moving on, as I said, to world missions. If you think about, just to kind of get us started thinking a little bit, why might the earliest pastors of the Wisconsin Synod, and you got to think back a couple of weeks of where a lot of them came from, why they might have had on their heart an interest in foreign, or we'll call them heathen, they called them heathen missions. Why do you think they might have had an interest in that, considering where they received their initial, a lot of them received their training? This would have been, go ahead.
Because they came from Germany, so they're to America, so they could, was America probably, you gotta go.
Well,
They came from Germany to pass it around, because otherwise only Catholics would have been known about it.
Okay, true. In Germany, there's a lot of Protestants who were interested in mission work. They didn't want the Catholics to be being the only ones doing mission work. And a lot of those earliest Wisconsin Synod pastors were trained in mission houses. And those mission houses, or mission societies that then sent them out, they didn't only have an interest in the German immigrants who had come to America, but they also had an interest in sending missionaries to places like India or Africa. And some of those early Wisconsin Synod pastors had entered those mission houses kind of with dreams of maybe being sent to someplace like Africa or India. In fact, the founding pastor of the Wisconsin Synod, Johannes Muehlhäuser, I think would have liked to have gone to Africa, but the mission house where he was getting trained, by the time he got there, he was in his mid-30s, and they thought, you're too old to be able to learn a new language like that. I think even Johannes Bading maybe kind of had dreams of being sent somewhere else, and the need was there in America, and so they got sent there, but I think they still kind of had that in their heart. So that was always kind of on their minds. How can we support missionaries or carry the gospel to people we'll call they would have termed, heathen. They would use that term, different than they were, not German immigrants is maybe a good way of thinking of it. Can we find places to send people there? Now, the very earliest efforts, interestingly, when the Wisconsin Synod became they were part of the founding members of what was called the Synodical Conference in 1872. And as part of the Synodical Conference, this would have included the Missouri Synod, the Minnesota Synod, the Ohio Synod, the Norwegian Synod, and the Illinois Synod. Those 6 synods were the first group that formed this Synodical Conference. We agree on doctrine, and now, okay, what can we do together? And one of the first things they thought about, they wanted to do is, how can we do some mission work? Now, one of the first things they did was they established something they called it the Inner Mission. It was sort of a welcoming center in New York City to welcome immigrants when they got off the boat, when the German immigrants got off the boat. Okay, let's make sure they get settled. Let's funnel them to, if they're moving to, say, Wisconsin, let's make sure they find a Lutheran church there, those sorts of things. Help them kind of get acclimated to America. But they also started looking around, where else we want to share the gospel with others who don't know it yet. They kind of looked at maybe there was a possible Chinese thing in St. Louis, but that didn't pan out. What they ended up doing was, starting in 1877, they started a mission down in the South aimed at African Americans in the South. In 1877, Reconstruction had ended. The North had the government had kind of pulled out a lot of resources, and now the Synodical Conference sent missionaries down there. And so, started a Sunday school in New Orleans, and then it spread eventually to Alabama and North Carolina eventually, and the Wisconsin Synod helped with some of the funding for that, pooling resources with other Synodical Conference churches. A lot of the pastors were mostly Missouri Synod guys, but the Wisconsin Synod would often have mission festivals. That was kind of a big thing. A lot of times they were outdoor things, joined together with other churches, but they'd have a special offering at those, focus on carrying the gospel to all people, and the funds that would be gathered would then go to this mission down in the American South. Eventually, that mission grew to the point where there was actually a seminary and college established. There was college established in Selma, Alabama, and then there was a seminary actually in Greensboro, North Carolina, for a while that was training workers for that work down in the South. Eventually, Wisconsin Synod, though, said, we'd like to do something on our own too, and so in the late 1880s, they started kind of thinking more seriously about that. How can we carry out our own mission effort? Now, the question was, okay, where? And who can we send? Well, the who part, they decided they approached some students at Northwestern already, when they were already at Northwestern, and saying, who were preparing for the pastoral ministry, who would be willing to be sent somewhere to do world mission work? And 3 students volunteered: Johannes Plucker, George Adashek, and Paul Meyerhoff. They did not receive any extra special training like in missiology or language work. They basically had their fees paid for, is kind of what it was, and expressed that willingness. In 1892, when the Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan synods kind of started working together, one of the things we mentioned a couple of weeks ago that they were going to work together was in worker training. So we're going to set up our schools in certain ways, like we talked about. The other thing was foreign mission work. Again, the question is, though, where? It was decided that they were going to try to reach out to Native Americans. But again, the question is exactly where? And so they sent out an exploratory team of 2 pastors out to Arizona in 1892 to go look for a place. They wanted a place that people that no other churches had been working in. And so they went down to Arizona. They found a missionary, a Presbyterian missionary, who was working among the Pima Indians, and he suggested the Apache. the Apache reservations. He said that the Apache, with the defeat of Geronimo only a few years earlier, had finally been settled on their reservations. And so they said, you might think about there. I don't think anybody's working there. And sure enough, they found out no other churches were working on the Apache reservations. So in 1893, our two of our missionaries there, two of our guys, our boys who were set apart for this work, in October of 1893, they get sent down to Arizona to the Apache reservation. Now, I have a question on your outline there. What do you think were the earliest challenges faced by these Wisconsin Synod missionaries to the Apache? Phil?
Language and climate of Arizona.
Yeah, language would be one. That's probably maybe the biggest one. He also said climate, but sure, go ahead.
I would think some of it would be like, they don't believe it, they believe in spirits and things, but they don't know anything about God, so.
Right, I mean, where do we start? Where do we start? How do we start? Like, do we start with the kids? Do we start with the adults? Where are they living? Which part of the reservation should we go to?
Did the Apache have some pretty bad feelings toward white people, or was that an issue?
Yes, that was an issue. There's a certain skepticism toward whites. Are you only here to exploit us? Why are you doing that? You know, there's some hard feelings there for sure. The language thing that Phil mentioned is just a big one. Here you got guys who knew German. They might have known a little bit of English. They did not know Apache. I mean, and so you're sending these boys down there, and where are they going to live? Initially, they had to live in. They had a couple of tents, but you know, Arizona climate. Particularly as it gets to winter, this is Apache reservation. That's high. That's kind of high desert, so it gets cold in the winter and really hot in the summer. And if you don't have decent shelter and stuff, it's going to take a bit to build houses. You know, there's just a lot of those guys who did this those first years. Being sent so far away, you know, from what you knew in Wisconsin, taking the train down there and. All right, here you go, boys. Go at it. Good. God be with you. Mary?
And they had to have wives that were willing to put up with all this.
That's another one. Now, the guy on the right, George Atashek, lasted a year. He just couldn't learn English, much less learn Apache. He didn't have a wife. The guy on the left, John Plucker, had a wife all lined up. He went out there. And then came back about a year later, got married, and she went out there with him. So Anna Plucker went out there with him. There's a neat, actually in the book, there's a little excerpt from her diary that she kept that kind of gives some details about her life there on the Apache reservation. They had their first child there, and maybe one or two children even there on the reservation. So it just, they stayed there till 1899. So they made it 6 years. The climate kind of just finally got, that was a difficult climate. A higher altitude is difficult on some people too. So, but those early years, and when Atashek left, he was replaced by Meyerhoff, and then when the Pluckers left, they were replaced by Carl Ginther. What they ended up doing for their first efforts were working with, first of all, the government schools. So they got permission to teach Plucker and then Meyerhoff learned English well enough, so they were able to teach English, and then they were given opportunities to teach Bible lessons. So the first efforts were trying to work with children. And eventually they got their own school started. So this was the first school building in Peridot, Arizona. And so schools have always been, grade schools have always been and are still. We still have two grade schools down there on the Apache reservation. The first baptisms didn't come until 1890, I think it was 98, so it took about 5 years. You notice, though, one child in there doesn't look like the others. That's the Plucker's baby. So she was among the first baptisms, too, on the reservation. But so that was, things started a little slow. Go ahead, Phil.
So they were trying to teach them English when they didn't know English that
Well, thankfully, Plucker picked up English quickly, and so did Paul Meyerhoff when he came. And then they were able to, the two of them were able to start learning Apache a little bit. And Meyerhoff, especially, the second guy who came, he actually became quite a linguist and learned Apache very well, and was there, I think he was there until the first decade of the 1900s. Where it really starts to take off, there's Meyerhoff on the left and Carl Ginther, who comes. This guy, Gustav Harders, comes in 1906, and in fact, here's a little trivia for you. It was on this day, today, April 13th, 1917, that he was called home to heaven, Gustav Harders. Harders had been teaching I think he had been a pastor at Jerusalem here in Milwaukee, and was also teaching at the Lutheran High School, but he had a throat ailment. And a lot of times, if you had something like that here in Wisconsin, you'd often go down, the desert was thought to be a good place to recover. So he went down there, learned about the Apache, worked there. He came back a little bit, throat ailment still wasn't getting better, so he took a call to be down there permanently. And he became kind of the first superintendent of the whole thing and got things much more organized. He was energetic in actually reaching out in other parts of Arizona, so he kind of got other churches started in the Phoenix area. He was kind of involved with that as well. Tireless missionary, just a tireless guy. Interesting thing he does, he writes 3 novels in German that were set on the Apache reservation that the publishing house published to generate interest and awareness among the Wisconsin Synod members back here in Wisconsin. Just kind of really interesting. I think those have been translated into English and are available. I'm not sure where exactly, but go ahead.
Whose picture is that? Who are you talking about?
Gustav Harders. Okay. Gustav Harders, yeah. So he ends up serving till 1917 and actually dies and when he died, he was working yet, so I think he was only in his mid-50s. Health problems caught up with him. I think he kind of worked himself to death perhaps a little bit too. Where things really start to take off again, kind of building off of what Harders is doing, is when you get a number of missionary families that end up kind of devoting their entire careers to the work on the reservation. Edgar Ginther comes with his new bride, Minnie. They got married right before they came. He graduated in 1911. So he graduates from the seminary, quick gets married. Their honeymoon is the trip out there, and they arrive on the reservation. Minnie Ginther, actually, I got to think of this through now. She would have been my great-grandmother's sister. So I don't know if that makes her great-great-aunt or something like that. Great-great-great-aunt, I don't know. But anyway, they come. Edgar Ginther is going to devote the rest of his entire ministry. He's going to, until he dies in like 1961 at the reservation. He spends 50 years there. Minnie, besides raising, I think, 8 or 9 children, ended up taking care of so many other orphans and so on. In 1967, she gets chosen to be the American Mother of the Year. So, I mean, just these two are just amazing people. Ginther himself, Edgar, he was often known as the tall missionary. That's him there with Chief Alchese. In 1923, when they dedicated Open Bible Lutheran Church in White River on the reservation, Chief Alchese, brought 100 of his tribes, 100 of his tribe into the church for the dedication, and announced basically to the people who were there and to his people who he brought, we need to listen to this tall pastor here when he speaks from the good book. All baptized then. So Chief Alchese was given the keys to the church, and when he died, he had them with him. He was buried with them in his hands, in his casket. Edgar Ginther, so this is Chief Alchese, the little boy there, is Edgar Ginther's son, Arthur. Full name, Arthur Alchese Ginther. Arthur spends his entire ministry on the Apache reservation. So you had 2 generations of Ginthers who devoted 80 years plus, probably closer to 90 years of ministry to the work on the reservation. Another key family was the Uplegger family. So this is Francis Uplegger. He goes out a couple of years after his son. His son will get assigned in 1917 from the seminary, as well as his son's classmate, Henry Rosen, who becomes Francis's son-in-law when Henry Rosen marries one of his daughters. Francis comes in his mid-50s, and he will spend the rest of his ministry there, which will end up being close to 40 years because he dies in his upper 90s at the reservation. Francis had actually been the director of the Lutheran High School in Milwaukee when he goes out there in 1919. This guy's a linguist genius. The Apache language was not written, it was just spoken. Francis Uplegger, through listening to people and talking to Apaches, he developed the Apache written language so that then you can teach them to read, translate things like the catechism, the hymnal, parts of the Bible into Apache. Just in fact, his Apache English dictionary was kind of still seen as the gold standard for classic Apache language, and is housed, I think, in a Huntington library in Huntington, California, or something like that. Just massive contribution. And then his like I said, his son and son-in-law will both serve their entire ministries on the Apache reservation. So you've got the Ginther family and the Uplegger/Rosen family, just huge contributions to the work on the reservation, and really kind of got things so established, so that by the end you've got, there's Francis Uplegger toward the end of his life in his favorite chair. That chair, by the way, is in our WELS Museum here over at Salem Landmark Church. So if you ever go to the WELS Museum and want to go downstairs, you go down to the basement, there's a nice Apache exhibit, and his chair is down there. They started a nursery in 1923, I think it was, or 22. A lot of the babies were abandoned. Apache babies were abandoned, especially if they were twins. They would be abandoned. So you've got, in this picture, the two people there, it's Frida and, what's his name again? Knoop was their name. He's the brother of Minnie Ginther. So you got, again, family connections. And they go out there to kind of help take care of the babies. This is a lady who spent most of her ministry, or most of her life out there, a lot of her life serving at the nursery. And schools were part of it too. Again, Ginther making desks. Missionaries, they had to be multi-faceted, gifted. They had to be able to, do that kind of work too, besides fix cars. You had to be able to fix the car and all that kind of stuff you see these missionaries doing. And so you've got the children there in their, as they said, their Christmas clothes. Every Christmas, the children back in Wisconsin or the families donate clothes that would go down to the Apache children. Also toys. They were encouraged not to give, just the toys you didn't like or that were broke. Give your good toy, that kind of thing.
Sorry, a little bit before you were talking about the Uplegger, he wrote the thing?
He created the written Apache language, yeah.
So, it wasn't written in English. Can you go back a couple slides and show us what that was again?
Oh, that's, am I going, I'm not going the right direction here. I got to hit the back button. Let's go here. I think it was to convey the, those are English letters. Those are our kind of letters. In fact, you can see the word Jesus down there. So yeah, it uses our alphabet. Yeah.
It appears that was written phonetically.
What?
If the Indian language was not actually a written language, it could have been just written phonetically.
Oh yeah, that's what he developed. He developed that, right, and that phonetic idea, but through listening to and talking to these Apache, trying to develop that kind of language, right. So we got a nursery going on. We've got, like I said, the schools, children, some teacher. There's Mrs. One of the Uplegger daughters was teaching. A guy named Arthur Meyer taught most of his ministry there. So just a lot of people who devoted a lot of their years. I'll bypass that map quick. These are some of the church buildings that were constructed over the years. This is, I think, the White River Church. A lot of times the members helped build. This is Sibique. If you want to read more, a book called Inishud was published by the publishing house just a couple of years ago by Eric Hartzell. Eric Hartzell grew up on the reservation. His dad had been a missionary. Later, he served there for a time. So he just has fascinating stories about it. Just great book to read if you want to read up about the Apache work. He also kind of gives a nice, great descriptions about the landscape there, what the reservation was like, the people the Apache who were living there, and so on. I have a personal story about it. In 1934, my grandfather graduated from the seminary, Rudolf Otto. In the 1930s, seminary graduates, there usually were not assignments for all of them. In fact, usually some years there were only assignments for 2 or 3 of them right away because financially we weren't opening missions. Guys weren't retiring because they couldn't afford to. And so a lot of times seminary guys, they graduate and no place for them to go. Well, my grandfather, his aunt, Minnie, said, come out to the reservation. We'll put you to work. Won't cost the Synod anything. You can just live with us. And so he went out there and started working, and then eventually got a call to White River after about a year. Well, meanwhile, back up in Wisconsin, a young gal by the name of Edna Steebs from Kewanee, Wisconsin, had done some training to be a deaconess nurse because she wanted to work down at the nursery down on the reservation. So who should pick her up from the train station but a young past missionary Rudolf Otto? And as they say, the rest is history. So they met down there. He served there for about till I think 1941. Again, the climate was kind of very difficult, I guess, on my grandmother, and so they moved. He took a call to Wilmot, Wisconsin then. I just love stories like that. God brings 2 people together, and it's on the Apache reservation. It's such a cool thing. So we've continued to have, of course, mission work on the reservation. We still do. So it's been over 125, 130 years. Kind of a neat thing. And for a long time, that was like the thing in our synod, the mission that was being done. 1920s, 30s, we kind of branched out a little bit. After World War I, when they redrew the borders, all of a sudden, part of Eastern Germany found itself in Poland. Poland is highly Catholic, not really friendly to Lutheran. So Lutheran Church all of a sudden kind of found themselves sort of cut off from, a lot of Lutherans there cut off from support. And so the Wisconsin Synod got connected with some German Lutheran churches in Poland, provided some pastors even, and provided some resources. Once World War II started, of course, our guys had to come home. I think they kind of came home before the fighting all started. And so we kind of had to communicate with them. It was difficult. After the war, a lot of them, the refugees, they kind of moved west to try to escape the Soviet Union army. A lot of them ended up settling in East Germany when the Iron Curtain's there. So you've got these free Lutheran churches that are there. Our synod continued to support them as much as they could over the years, meeting with them as much as possible. Eventually, what happened on that, what came about with that, formed a Lutheran church body that we are still in fellowship today, the Evangelical Lutheran Free Church of Germany. This year at the seminary, we have, as a student this year, we have their student from their seminary, Leipzig, is attending our seminary this year. So it's kind of cool that we have, Benny Hook is his name. Does he room with you, Phil? Yeah, he rooms with Phil, one of Phil's roommates. So Benny has been here with us, and so we have this nice connection with it's called the ELFK. We call it because church in German is Kirche, which is K, so ELFK. So that kind of how things got, how that was another mission effort in those early years. We had another mission effort with the Synodical Conference starting in the 1930s. It came about because started with those African American churches in the South had a desire to reach out to people in Africa. So they started raising money and they started asking the Synodical Conference, can we maybe look into this? Well, then a guy named Jonathan Ekong showed up. This guy was from Nigeria. He was sent to America to look for help by a church body that had started in Nigeria. I think it started initially by some Scottish Presbyterians or something like that, but they pulled out, and plus those Nigerian Christians didn't completely agree with the Scottish, what they were teaching, and so they sent Jonathan Ekong over to America to look for help. Well, he comes across an article about the Synodical Conference looking for an opportunity in Africa. He starts attending the seminary down in Greensboro, the college and seminary in Greensboro, and gets to know this guy, Dr. Henry Now. Dr. Henry Now is the director of that seminary. He brings this need to the attention of the Synodical Conference. In 1934, I think it was, or 35, a team was sent over to explore and to kind of investigate what the possibilities are with this group. They were from a particular tribe in Nigeria. The guy on the right, Emmanuel Albrecht, was a Wisconsin Synod man. The guy on the left is Henry Now. This is Albrecht wearing his cool African hat there. And so they decide, hey, let's go in on this. Now think about the timing of this. 1936, 1937, still the Depression. But yet the Synodical Conference said, we're going to do this. The first guy they send over permanently to be the superintendent of the whole thing was a Wisconsin Synod pastor by the name of William Schweppe. And so William Schweppe will spend the rest of his ministry in Africa. In fact, he will die in Africa in a car accident in Zambia in 1968 and is buried in Zambia. But he becomes the superintendent, and the Wisconsin Synod provides several missionaries. This is a picture of the missionaries. I think this is late 1940s. Schweppe and his family are to the far left. The fourth from the left is Norbert Rhyme and his wife, Wisconsin Synod people. All the way to the second from the right is George Bear and his wife. George Bear served there for a few years and then came back to America and accepted a call to teach Latin at Northwestern. I had him as a Latin professor my sophomore and junior years at Northwestern Prep. And I will say he was a wonderful gentleman, and I transferred in from Wisco into Northwestern Prep as a sophomore, and he caught me up on Latin because I was a little bit behind. But just that was kind of how we supported the work there. In many ways, was through mission work or through missionaries providing manpower. They also started a hospital there, so this became quite a mission. They had schools, they had a hospital. This particular hospital was initially funded by a Wisconsin Synod couple from Milwaukee in memory of their daughter who had died. And so there's that kind of financial support as well. Now, let's see here. All right, there's Jonathan Ekong later in his life. He became a leader. I think he lived to be like 102 or 101, and his relatives still are leaders in that Lutheran church body in Nigeria. Jonathan Ekong, E-K-O-N-G. 1930s, as I mentioned, we're dealing with the Depression. Finances are difficult, and it's even exacerbated in the Wisconsin Synod because we have accumulated by this time a sizable debt to the tune of over $700,000. Now, to put that in perspective, today's money, that would be approaching an $18 million debt. To put it in another way, and the Missouri Synod had a debt as well, but to put it another way, the Wisconsin Synod, because of our size, much smaller, this was like $3, this would have been $3.13 per member, versus for the Missouri Synod, their debt amounted to about $1 per member. So this was just crippling. President Brenner is the guy on the left. He's the new John W. O. Brenner was the new president. He was elected in 1933, the only time in our synod's history where we unelected a synod president. The guy who had been serving was Gustav Bergerman, and he was willing to keep serving, but the synod elected John W. O. Brenner. Brenner came with a reputation for good fiscal management. He had a lot of, the synod had confidence in him. And so the challenge he had often, he and the synod treasurer would often have to sit down each month and decide, are we going to pay the missionaries this month, or are we going to pay the professors at the schools? A lot of times they sided with the missionaries because they figured the professors at the schools and their families could at least go in the cafeteria and eat lunch and get food, and they had homes and so on. So it was very challenging. But in 1935, so this is Brenner's first synod convention as president, a young pastor named Edgar Haneke, who was on the committee of the Apache mission, he gets up and says, we need to make a concerted effort to pay down this debt. We can't just sit here paying interest payments. We need to go all in. And he had already been trying to do this in Michigan. He was a pastor in Plymouth, Michigan at this time, because he started putting together, he called them his bulletins. These were, they come out every few months, get sent to Wisconsin Synod people, kind of inspirational messages about mission work, about stewardship, informing the Synod about the mission work that's going on, informing them about how progress we're making to pay down the debt. So, for example, he was kind of cutting edge in 1930s. He's using graphs and charts and showing how we're making progress. Look, it's going down. It's going down. Even drawings and things that he would draw. We got to fill in the gap so we can get that gospel train to the people, to the cities, to the missions. Just kind of trying to inspire people. This guy was Edgar Haneke. We'll see him. We'll talk about him as we go along here, but just super energetic. Well, by 1945, not only is the synod debt paid off, not only has the synod taken care of times where we kind of had gotten in arrears with not keeping up with salaries and things like that. We caught up. We even had $350,000 in a reserve fund. So the 1945 convention, there's a lot of optimism. The war's just about to end. I mean, like they met in August, early August, and by the time the convention was over, the atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima. So there's a lot of optimism. It's the happy convention. Haneke comes with the proposal, we need to do overseas mission work now. Now, Brenner and other leaders are kind of like, let's just tap the brakes a bit here. They have memories of, what they went through in the 30s when we don't have enough money. They want to make Brenner, he was not against missions. He was against jumping into something without being fiscally responsible. I think that would be a good way to put it. But he gets outvoted. Convention says, yep, let's go do it. So they form a committee to gather information. Now there's debates on the committee. What does that mean? How aggressive should we be? It's not until 1949, so 4 years later, that they finally get to the point where they're saying, we're going to send a exploratory team to Africa. I should have backed up here. I'm going the wrong direction here. Right there. Haneke, the guy on the left, and Arthur Wacker, another pastor in Michigan, finally agree to be the guys who are going to go on this trip. So in April of 1949, they loaded up that vehicle. That's their camper, kind of. They take an 8,000-mile trip across the ocean on a ship, land in Cape Town, South Africa, and embark on a 4,000-mile trek around Africa, southern and central Africa, looking for a suitable place for the Wisconsin Synod to do mission work. Again, they're looking for a place where where people aren't working already. Their journeys, I don't know if you can see it on the map, kind of take where they go. They end up finding what was then called Northern Rhodesia. Today it's known as Zambia. And so the trip, Haneke chronicles it, ends up putting together a film strip that gets shown in congregations around the synod. You can still find that on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and type in Africa Still Calls, one of the hits you'll get is this Haneke, you'll see it was posted by the WELS World Missions, this Haneke film strip, which is just fascinating to hear the conversations they had, the challenges they had to work through, that sometimes, I mean, I can't believe how they got that thing across on some difficult terrain at times. Just the whole trip was something else. The WELS 49ers, they were called. If you want to read more about it, join the Historical Institute and we can get you a copy of the booklet that Haneke himself wrote. So what's going to end up happening is in 1951 convention then, the Synod is going to resolve to send one missionary to Japan, 2 missionaries to Africa. Fred Tiefel accepts the call. He's a pastor out in Washington. Professor Tiefel's uncle. If you know, Professor Tiefel retired from the seminary. He goes over to Japan. His task is twofold. One is to serve military personnel over there who are often on leave in Japan, or there's a lot of military in Japan, plus Korea's going on, so often Korean soldiers in Korea are coming over to Japan on leave, so he's serving our Wisconsin Synod boys over there, and then to do exploratory work to get things started in Japan. And he starts gathering students for Bible studies, he starts doing language study, all this. The only problem is that this is the time when the tensions are rising between Wisconsin and Missouri Synod, and he's observing Missouri Synod missionaries in Japan do things like worship and work together with Presbyterians and Episcopalians, and he's saying, wait a second, this is church fellowship problems. And so when the Wisconsin Synod doesn't break with Missouri in 1955 and then 1956, Tiefel breaks with the Wisconsin Synod. Now, in spring of 1957, Haneke and President Naumann, Oscar J. Naumann is the president now, he's the guy on the left, they make a trip over to Japan to talk to Tiefel. And they call him up on the phone to set up an appointment, and Tiefel hangs up on President Naumann. They go to the compound. They had bought some property, and they had a couple of houses on the property. They go there, ring the doorbell. He doesn't come to the door. We lost that initial effort because of Japanese laws, all the land and everything, it was all in Tiefel's name, not in the Synod's name. So we lost all that early effort. However, Haneke and Naumann were there to welcome the new missionary who was showing up, who had just graduated from the seminary, Richard Seeger, and he was joined shortly after that by Richard Petter. So we restarted the work in Japan in 1957 with these two guys. Interestingly, Petter had come with some experience. He had served actually in the Missouri Synod mission in Japan for a while, came back to the Wisconsin Synod. His wife was actually Japanese, so he was ideally suited for helping restart the work. And the work in Japan continued. We don't have any missionaries in Japan now anymore, but there is still a church body there that we founded. Kermit Haben, here's some picture of him with his group there. Kermit Haben came in 1968, spent his whole ministry there. So you have, again, it takes guys like that often who are going to dedicate their whole lives to that. Question?
A friend of mine, his name is Josh Stahman. He's a pastor now. He was sent when he graduated.
Yeah, he was probably one of the last ones, yeah. And our Professor Wardell at the seminary was kind of the last, I think, one to be brought home from Japan when he took the call to the seminary. But we still have contact with them, and we still encourage them and try to provide some pastoral training, things like that, over in Japan. Africa, we got going again, finally in 1953 when a pastor, Albrecht Haben, I don't know if he's related, I think he might have been related, Hastings, Nebraska, he was pastor there, and one of his laymen, Paul Siegler, and his wife went over as lay workers, and then a seminary graduate, Otto Drevlo, they go over as the first team, and again, they have kind of a little truck there that they go over with, and the first service will be held in December of 1953 near Lusaka, Zambia. The work is a little bit, the first few years are a little bit challenging. There's a little differences in philosophy and how to approach things. And again, they're going to kind of work through the schools to try to get things going. But eventually Zambia becomes one of our, and then neighboring Malawi, still some of our strong mission efforts there. This is kind of an interesting map. This was probably published in, I'd say, the 1954 maybe, or 55. It shows all the different missions, though, of the Synod, including our support through the Synodal Conference of the missions in, the African Americans in the South, then over in Nigeria, Zambia, Japan, still working with the refugee mission in Germany. The Apache, we had a Hispanic work. We were doing Hispanic work in the Tucson area, starting in 1949, and then home missions. So it's just kind of an interesting map that's trying to show people in our synod, here's what we're trying to do. The work in Africa really takes off in the early 60s when a whole new team of missionaries comes on board. Guys like Ernst H. Wentland. So he's the father of former seminary president Paul Wentland, who's in that picture somewhere among the kids. Another guy, Tate Sauer, Theodore Sauer, he's on the far right. Raymond Cox, Richard Mueller, John Janicek. These are guys who come in the kind of that early years of the 60s and spend many, decades serving over there. One of the key things they got started, first of all, they branched out into Malawi. So this is a group there, an early group in Malawi, so neighboring country. They recognize we got to start training native pastors, and so a Bible Institute gets started in 1964, followed by, and this is Ernst Wentland teaching a class there, and then his wife even taught some of the lower level classes, so she's teaching a class there on the Reformation to some people, some students. And then the seminary itself got started in 1969, and the buildings there, and in 1976, that was the first time we sent one of our seminary professors over to teach for a few months. Karl Lavrens went over there in 1976. He was the president of our seminary at the time. That continued. Did you ever go over there, Professor Cook? I did too. Yeah, there's a group of guys I got to teach some Lutheran history to and Lutheran confessions to. It was just a cool experience. That was in 2014 that I got to do that. So our work there has continued and progressed. Another thing they recognize, we got to do medical, kind of a mission of mercy as well. And so Edgar Heineke's wife, Maida, was a nurse. And so she's going to, between the two of them, they're going to start doing, kind of get this off the ground, which eventually becomes Central Africa Medical Mission, CAM, which is still ongoing today. This is Barbara Welch. She was the first nurse who went over there in '61. And they had the mobile dispensary, so we'd go on the road to meet to different villages to do this kind of work. So that's our work in Africa. Oh boy, I'm running out of time here. Okay. The Nigerian mission, I should just maybe say that real quickly. So when the break with Missouri happened in '63, we actually sent a team over there to say, we'd be happy to take this on if you'd like. We laid out why we broke. They decided to stay with the Missouri Synod, which I think in the end was a blessing because that would have sucked up all of our resources to support it, because that was a big enterprise there. But we have still, there's some that didn't always stay with that original church, so there's a small group in Nigeria, a small group in Cameroon that we still have contacts with and still try to serve, primarily by distance learning, training their pastors is kind of the way we've been doing it. After the break with Missouri, we started getting all sorts of requests for mission work. groups that were concerned about, doctrine. And so 1960s, we see Asia come into picture. This is President Naumann, Edgar Heinecke, and Leonard Koeniger on a trip to Hong Kong. And so we'll get work done in the early 1960s in Hong Kong. So there's missionary Paul Bain baptizing some people on Christmas in Hong Kong. This is a Chinese pastor with his group there that we were supporting. Because of radio broadcast, we got connected with Taiwan, so started work in Taiwan. This is a Everlasting Happiness Village, the church there. I love the name, the Everlasting Happiness Village. So that's the church there that we built. This is a lay evangelist there who's teaching his congregation to sing "What a Friend We Have in Jesus" in Chinese. We also got connections in Indonesia by the end of the 60s. This is Howard Festerling, who served as an Indonesian missionary. By the time, it wasn't until like about 76 or 77 that we finally got missionaries over in Indonesia. That Indonesian mission has really grown now. They operate now their own seminary. We provide some support, but they've got quite a mission going there. And it's challenging in Indonesia. It's a highly Muslim nation. But our mission there is making a lot of inroads, doing a lot of good work. India, kind of how interesting how we got started in India. There was a ladies group at one of our WELS churches in Flint, Michigan. I think it was actually maybe the LWMS group there. They sent Bibles over to some mission society that was sending them to India. The pastor's wife wrote her name, address in each of the Bibles. This guy, T. Paul Mitra, got one of those Bibles and wrote to her. She passed it on to her husband, who passed it on to the right mission people. And the next thing we know, we're starting work we actually brought this guy. This guy actually spent a year at our seminary I think it was 1971. And his wife was a doctor, so a lot of his work included medical work, and we provided a van for her kind of mobile medical work. So that's kind of how we got started in India, which was just kind of again, a fascinating story. Latin America also got started in the early 1960s. In 1963, I think it was, we sent Ernie Zimdars down to El Paso to then do exploratory work into Mexico. A few years later, we got a connection with a Mexican pastor named Pastor Luna. Oh, we also got Puerto Rico. This is Roger Sprain going down to Puerto Rico, down in Puerto Rico, and doing radio work. Here's Pastor Luna. Pastor Luna reached out to us. We kind of, through conversations, we're in fellowship with each other. We start supporting their work there. They form a Mexican church body that becomes in fellowship with us. We send some missionaries down there. Zimdars, of course, is down there. This is a document, kind of a special document that's sort of their constituting document. And Heinecke is mentioned in there. Naumann is mentioned in there. Harold Essman, who's also working there, was mentioned in that document. So, 1973 or 4, we send a team of 3 guys to Colombia. This is Ernie Zimdars is on the left. On the right is Roger Sprain and his wife. The guy in the middle is a teacher, Francis Warner. And they go down there. This is the showing of a Luther movie that was sort of the kickoff for the first worship service. And then the first worship service in Bogota was the next week. We still have work down there that we're doing in Medellin and Bogota and other parts of Colombia. In fact, we've been sending the last few years a vicar down there every year. So one of Phil's classmates was down there last year. Brazil, we entered in the 1980s. So mid-1980s, we finally got a team of 5 that we sent down to Brazil. A lot of that got pulled back when there were financial challenges in the 2000s. Although we still are maintaining connections there, and kind of through some connections in Portugal, we're getting more connections back to Brazil again. So it's just kind of interesting how those things tend to work. Iron Curtain comes down. All of a sudden, we have mission opportunities in Bulgaria and Russia. Who would have thought, if you grew up when I did in the 1970s, 80s, who would have thought that we'd go to Russia? Lord opens doors. So Russia, Bulgaria, Albania, we sent missionaries in the 1990s. I had a classmate and roommate who was in Russia. The Confessional Evangelical Lutheran Conference, I should talk about that real quickly. This was established in 1993. It's what do you want to call it? Federation of church bodies, a lot of them that we have started, but worldwide. Includes the ELS, also includes our Free Church in Germany, but includes the churches in Africa, Zambia and Malawi, Japan, Puerto Rico, Mexico, down in Colombia. I mean, just name a place where we've done mission work, their church body is part of this. First met in 1993. These were the original officers. The one in the left, far left, is a German pastor. The rest are, the one in the middle was Dwayne Tomhave. He was World Missions. The guys on the right, Armin Panning, Wilbert Gavrish, were seminary professors. This is the first group meeting there in 1993. They met in Germany. They met in Germany again in 2017, of course, Reformation 500. They meet every 3 years. So they're scheduled to meet again next year, and we're going to meet in Lusaka. I'm on the I got appointed to the Theological Commission of the CELC, so I get to go. I get to go this summer for a face-to-face meeting, and then I get to go next summer too. So that's the CELC. More recent decades, we've gone into some difficult places. Pakistan, we had to pull guys out of a native Pakistani out of there. He ended up getting trained, and his son got trained at our seminary. Dr. Jordan, he's now out in Christ Pewaukee. He does a lot of work reaching out to Hindus. Nepal, we've got a connection with a guy in Nepal. It's again kind of dangerous to go for us to have a presence. We can't really have a presence there. They're very kind of militant Hindus there. But a guy named Joshi is really doing outstanding work, and we support him and provide training for the men that he's trying to train. We are trying to do work. We've been doing work since 2005. We established Asia Lutheran Seminary, so training Chinese and others in that Southeast Asia area. So graduation. I got to teach there in 2017.
I've never had a chance to teach there. I had the call to be the president.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You did. Yeah. But I got to teach there in 2017. A group of guys taught them the Augsburg Confession. It was kind of fun in Beijing. They had to relocate a few years ago. They had been in Hong Kong, but they're now in Thailand because China is not so friendly anymore, or at least not as tolerant as they had been. Where are we now? A few different things. Academio Cristo and Tel Network we're trying to reach out through the internet. And so providing training online, and then trying to encourage particularly Hispanics Latinos to gather in churches, house churches kind of thing, and then we're trying to provide additional education and support, and it's a interesting idea. And it's booming, yeah. I mean, they talk about that hundreds of thousands of people are accessing the app. It's an app that you use to kind of take the courses, and a lot of different seminary students and others are involved with some of the teaching, and it's kind of fascinating. Professor, through some connections we've had in America, we've gotten connections over in Ethiopia and Kenya. This is, I think, the Kabedi, when the Ethiopian church was accepted into, an Ethiopian church body was accepted into fellowship with us. They're also part of the CELC now, and we, again, provide support and training of pastors over there. Also in Kenya, another place, and now Uganda. So different church bodies. This is Professor Cherney is in that picture with some group from Portugal. So they're kind of going in that. I mean, we've got a guy there that a little church body that we're in fellowship with and trying to provide support. The Vietnam story, I wish I had more time to talk about that, because that's just the Hmong Fellowship Church that we're in that we made connections with. We built that training center there. We haven't been able to use yet because of government red tape, but we have a Hmong pastor that we trained, Boon Keo Lor, plus another missionary, Joel Nitz, are both stationed in Vietnam, teaching the pastor, making this Hmong Fellowship Church. They wanted to be Lutheran. They heard Boon Keo Lor's sermons on the internet, And they said, we like that. Make us Lutherans. And so slowly but surely we're teaching. This is a church body that's grown to be 150,000 people. It's very likely that in the next decade that we will be in fellowship or supporting or working with more people overseas than we do that are numbers in the WELS. Our WELS were about 330-some thousand. It's likely that that there will be more than that we will have contacts with and connections with and be in fellowship with around the world than we do in our WELS. That's just the doors that the Lord is opening up, even in places like London and Australia and New Zealand and Congo. Just every time I'm part of the Commission on Interchurch Relations, and almost every meeting we have like a list of, here are some other nations we might be looking at, another church body that we're talking to, Lutheran church bodies that are looking for the truth. So we can be thankful that the Lord has preserved that truth among us and given us opportunities to share that all over the world. There you go. Any questions? Or sure.
Not positive if it's for you or if it's for Pastor. We had somebody visit a couple years ago, right, from one of the African synods that did a Bible study. And I think when you were talking about Philip and the Ethiopian and Christ, like you said, they could trace their history back to Philip. Was that one of the ones that we saw up here?
I think that was the guy who was shaking hands with President Schrader in that picture.
Dr. Kabedi is the founder of the church body in Ethiopia. So, yes,
I don't know.
remember exactly what you're referencing, Kate, but yeah, the Ethiopian church traces its roots all the way back to the Ethiopian eunuch, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, which has been kind of interesting, is some of these connections we've been making over, like with Ethiopia, Kenya. Some of them they're because of refugees that have left South Sudan, so there's refugee camps and such. Well, here in America, for example, in Omaha, one of our churches in Omaha came into contact with a group of South Sudanese immigrants there. We trained a guy named Peter Burr through our seminary's Pastoral Studies Institute. He's a WELS pastor, and through him made connections over to Ethiopia and these churches in Ethiopia and Kenya and others. I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing, just how this circle goes, And the same with the Hmong. I mean, the Hmong work started here in America, but it's through that we made this connection over in Vietnam. And just the doors the Lord is opening up are just kind of blow your mind. And like Vietnam, who would have thought we'd ever have in communist Vietnam that we'd be able to do mission work there? It just doesn't, from our human perspective, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we went to the Apaches right after conquering them. We went to Japan right after dropping bombs on
Right.
them. There is sort of a crazy timing on a number of the world missions that has happened. It's a God thing.
Yep. The Lord opens doors, and what a privilege that we get to have a part in that. We get to have a part in that. So.
Please give a big
Oh.
thank you to, another question, Kate?
So would we have had any connection to the Confessing Lutheran Church in Germany that was like Bonhoeffer when the Lutheran Church was part of the Nazi state and was a state church, and then we're just a God church?
I'd say there were a few, maybe after the war, a few remnants. Like one guy who was part of that was Herman Sasse. And Sasse eventually moves to Australia, and we have we end up, there's some connections with him. The thing, the whole situation in Germany just got kind of, obviously during World War II, very messy. And after World War II kind of continued that way because things were just so disorganized. And then the Iron Curtain, then East Germany, West Germany, and so some remnants perhaps, some of those free churches, that the ELFK maybe had a little bit of remnant of that. But yeah, it was a difficult time. It was a very difficult time. And the 80th anniversary of Bonhoeffer's death was actually last week. He died in think it was Wednesday in 1945. He was executed by the Gestapo only like a week before his camp got liberated, which is kind of sad. But I don't want to, that's a downer. God, I would finish. I'm sorry. Right, yeah, I've heard, I got to watch that movie yet, yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah, I'm sorry I went on and on again today, but thanks for putting up with me.
Speaking of God things, with Kevin sort of going to heaven and this being Lent and everything else, having Professor Otto here has been just gold. So please give him a big round of applause.